قسما بالله رب العالمين ما ارتضينا غير دين الله دين فهو دين الحق دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء
هذا الدر وهذه الكلم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار الظلم وحلا في مولده النغم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome to Finding Me in the ITV networks today with a very special guest, a friend, a colleague, and I think somebody who's truly inspirational. Sello Motsei has been on the South African landscape for a long time. He's been closely associated with many of us at ITV, and I think it's time to uncover the beautiful personality behind this amazing individual. So assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah, my sister.
You know, we've been speaking for so many years, but we've never had the opportunity to actually interrogate this relationship or this association that we've had. It was just you bumped into each other, you made salam, and then you carried forward. But the South African landscape is changing tremendously.
Precisely.
And it's important for us to understand each of us in our own spaces, in our own context, and then to ask the question is that how do we then take this understanding of each other into a more diverse society? And South Africa is a very diverse society, but there are very many challenges.
Precisely.
And the recent, you know, well, the biggest argument or perhaps the biggest point of contention recently amongst Muslims has been the dichotomy between African Muslims and Indian Muslims and the challenges that South Africans as Muslims as a whole face, because apartheid created these boxes, accented or accentuated our differences, specifically focusing on race, and that has infiltrated into the religion, although Islam does not recognize and came to abolish the whole concept of racism. What brought you to Islam, and how do you manage these particular challenges?
I think for me it was quite interesting, especially growing up in townships, and half of the time there is that thing, and I don't know whether you still remember in the 80s, 90s, when you open a newspaper for year-end examinations, you will see Muslims' names being number ones and half of the time. And that thing, it was inspiring for me. However, one day I was visiting this guy who happened to be a ZCC guy. And we used to go to him, and he was our elder. He used to tell us stories, you know, interesting stories. And when I was there, he started talking about positive things, about Islam, you know. Telling us now Muslims read, you know, one of the things which he has learned within the Muslim community is that now they are highly, highly inspired by reading, you know. And obviously he was talking about the aspect of intelligence. Reading is obviously associated with intelligence. And he started taking out books in his room to say, look, go out there and start read about Islam so that you may also be inspired like myself. But though, bear in mind, he was not a Muslim, you know. And I think for me, that journey of meeting this guy who happened to be a ZCC guy who gives you this beautiful message, it was more than inspiring, in a sense that now this guy, he was not speaking to you on the basis of limitations and discriminations. He was talking to you being open, read much about Islam, but at the same time, he's saying to you, this is the good message, you know. So now, for me, it was exciting to see this guy giving me, from a Christian background, talking positive about Islam. So that was, for me, it was to say, okay, fine, it's Islam. Then I started reading, and anyway, I loved reading. You know, it has always been my passion, actually, reading. And then he introduced me to one guy by the name of Yahya Chauke, and to say, Marcelo, please, here is a guy, can this guy take you through, you know, the process of understanding this message? And then I went to the mosque with Yahya Chauke, and when I arrived there, it was a youth program. There were young Muslims there who were just, you know, talking, you know, concepts and you know, unfolding the universe around them and being conscious about their position in time and space. They inspired me. I don't want to lie, to say, how can these young people, and at that time, I couldn't articulate as compared to them, you know. And then I said to myself, from now on, I'm going to be like these guys, you know. I started also collecting books from them. And as a result, on 2 weeks after that, then I embraced Islam. But there is one old man who changed my worldview about the world around us, especially when he introduced me to the universality of the message. He was from also the Apostolic Church background, more Christian also, but being a Muslim. But at the same time, he was more universal in outlook. You'll visit a Christian community, will just come up with a song. And then you get surprised that, no, but I've never seen Muslims singing like this, you know. But Uncle Farouk Squadli, that's the name of that old man. He started sharing with me about the importance of philosophy, the importance of maths, the importance of science, the importance of economics. And that became a foundation of me understanding the world around me. So I can simply say to you, they helped me to understand the self within the environment which I find myself in, but beyond the environment which I find myself in.
Yeah, so it's the stuff in relation to everything else.
Precisely. So I started appreciating more Christianity, which I came from.
Yes.
I started appreciating more of the books which I was reading about Buddhism, you know, to say the DNA is the same. So why is this fuss, you know, about the message? Why are we so fragmented when it comes to the understanding of God and His message and His messengers?
And basically all of them speak about humanity,
Precisely.
isn't it? And love and compassion.
Precisely.
And kindness.
Yes.
And sharing.
Yes. So you see that DNA in all of them. And then you look at yourself and say, but also I am the embodiment of the same DNA. Because of someone was asking me, so are you an African? I said, hey, I doubt, you know. And he said, no, how can you say you doubt? I said to him, look, my DNA and my memory has been influenced by books actually, beyond the borders of South Africa. When you look at books from the Buddhist community, when you look at the books from even the Hindu community, you know, some of those philosophies, how they've enriched my worldview, it is difficult for me to say, I can safely say to you that I have 100% African DNA because of all these colorings which comes from different communities, which makes me more a universal man than anything else.
Well, it also questions this whole argument about authentically African.
Yes, yes.
But does such a thing exist?
Look, let's look at the self, and then I will take you to the concept of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is not about the pigmentation. Ubuntu is from a word root muntu. In its literal sense, it means an intellectual being. And in its deeper sense, it means a divine being. So our divinity is beyond African.
Yes.
Our divinity is beyond our pigmentation, even our tribal inclinations. So therefore, it is difficult, hence, for me to just say I'm purely African. Because of also there is a historical background of how we became Africans also. But the highest form of us as human beings is our divinity, which it resonates across the board. When I travel in any country, I was shocked to find myself in those countries because of I thought I'm a South African. When you arrive there, you find that now here is the same DNA. Like a typical example, when I arrived in Indonesia, we were there for a program, you know, it was a training program. When we were traveling, you know, in trying to understand the landscape of Indonesia, I came across this community talking about the concept of letsema, you know. And Letsema is more of helping each other as a community. And when the Indonesians were explaining it, I found, no, we have this
The
thing.
same, yeah.
So what is wrong with us, by always looking at us, each other actually on the basis of this fragmentation?
Of difference.
Yes, because of when you say you are a divine being, then automatically your nationality, your tribal inclination, it falls off. We start to see each other on that plane of humanity. And look,
And that is how Allah created
precisely,
us. Yes,
you
He
know.
said that I've created you into nations and tribes just so that you may identify one
precisely.
another. Yes.
It can't be less than that.
No.
We are here.
Not that you discriminate against each
Precisely.
other. Yes.
But we are here to find that divinity in each other. And beyond that, this divinity will help us to master the universe. Because of we are that universe which the Creator is talking about in his holy book, the Quran. And interestingly, one of the things which helped me also in terms of understanding this message was the support which I got from my grandmother, who will wake me up for sir, when you have to prepare for fast.
Subhanallah.
And throughout her life, she was on her post, to support me, to say, look, I know what this message has done to my grandson. Because of he knew Sello before interacting with Islam, that he became a better human being.
But that's exactly what Islam is supposed to do.
So because of that, she made sure that she supports me throughout. No one will speak ill of Islam in front of my grandmother. And it was said, I think I see her like, Abu Talib and the Prophet.
Yes.
That support structure, which the Prophet ﷺ had from his uncle.
Cool. And it's a very important support structure because if
Precisely.
you look at it in the South African sense, and we're just speaking about the very volatile nature of the South African landscape, we find that a lot of indigenous Africans who want to become Muslim struggle with the sense of identity and acceptance from their family. But I want to take this discussion a little further. We're at the break. When we come back, we can talk about those challenges and how does then somebody who embraces Islam overcome this particular difficulty. But we'll see you after the break.
بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار ظلم وحلا في مولده النغم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار ظلم وحلا في مولده النغم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome to the second segment of Finding Me today on the ITV networks with our very special guest, Sello Motsei. Sello is also heading Quebon Consulting and they are doing some excellent innovative projects which are going to come to as soon as we've uncovered this particular personal journey. But Sello, in my experience and encountering of the young Muslims, African Muslims who have on their own come into Islam, the biggest challenge with those students, etc., that I've spoken to on campus and off was always the fact that there was a tremendous resistance from within their family and their parents, and automatically in many instances they were actually pushed out. Yours was the opposite experience. So like you said, it reminds you of that particular history of the Prophet and Abu Talib radiallahu ta'ala, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sorry, and Abu Talib. So the question for me then is that those that are struggling today, when they accept Islam and the resistance from their family, is it because of the way Islam is perceived, the way Islam is practiced in South Africa, and perhaps this, continuation of these separate boxes in a way that almost Islam is racialized?
Look, it is said, I want to start with that thing. Because of the moment you embrace Islam, the first thing which you are taught is things which you shouldn't do.
So always, all the no's.
Yes.
All the haram.
Yes, harams. You don't eat pork. Pork is haram. Then you end up seeing your family as non-believers. That's the first framing which we have.
I never thought of that.
At the moment we embrace, the message. Now, the moment you other your parents, can you imagine? These are your parents. And I think the first thing which we are not taught is the philosophical dimension of the message. We are taught other things as opposed to the philosophy of the message. I will give a typical example. One Molana said to one of his students that he mustn't greet, my parents when he comes actually to my place. And I asked him why. He said, no, you don't have to. I said, why? I said, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And I said, no, but it doesn't make sense. And because of the message teaches us that the entrance to heaven lies on the feet of our mothers. So therefore it gives women a status automatically, And you are saying to me that if you meet my mother, you don't have to greet her. It doesn't make sense. No. So you see, these are some of the teachings which young Muslims, when they go back home, they are exposed to.
But now, these are faulty teachings.
Precisely. Let's take it further. In my case, I was fortunate that I was surrounded by believers. Because of the Quran is stating it categorically that we cannot deceive the believers. Yes. And it's clear. And it is not saying Muslims per se, it says the believers. So now here we talk about people who understand the concept of heart to heart, who sees themselves in other people, But when a person introduces you to the message and other people, then you're out of the picture. Obviously, they will resist you. Most of us, we came into Islam coming from respectable families, respecting our parents. But after we embraced Islam, we started disrespecting our parents.
No, but then that is against the message of Islam.
Yes.
Totally.
Because
where is then the mercy and the compassion that will then allow you to try and encourage them to understand
yes.
what you have embraced?
Precisely. Now you start to see them as non-believers. And how do you interact with a non-believer? You other them. Now, look, you
But then you're already discriminating. I'm better than you.
Precisely. You sleep in that house. These people, they've taken good care of you. And you even go to the extent of saying everything which they stand for is haram. Yeah. So now you build a wall between you and your parents. But now, if you interact with people who says to you, what is this message all about? And you start to realize that even the concept of Tawheed, you look at from the African culture, DNA, that Tawheed is not only, it cannot be reduced to one, Allah is one, It's about the whole ecosystem because of their encompassing that oneness, Now, when you go to an African communities, and especially that one, and you greet them, they will say to you, Dumela, which is from the word root Dumelo, meaning agreement, So now imagine if we are taught this message from an agreement perspective. So imply you start to look at positive aspects of a family, positive aspects from the Christian community, which raised you. We shouldn't forget that coming from Christianity, it has its own positive aspects. We could have been worse if we were not coming from that background.
Or if we didn't have some form of religion,
Precisely,
isn't it?
You understand. So now, when we come in contact with Islam, we should say, okay, fine, we have another understanding compared to other understandings. And what lessons can I draw from these guys which can enrich my outlook? But it's unfortunate that we other even our parents.
And yet the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said that knowledge and wisdom is the lost property of the believer, means you'll take from every culture where you can find it. And he also, if you realize, the message in Islam is that there are different cultures. and that whatever is good in that culture, you keep it. And you see that in his example when he interacted with the Sahaba. And even those that came, from the Jahil period, or they came with different ways or different speech or different names or whatever, if there was good in it, he encouraged them to keep it.
And that's the important aspect which we failed to interact with as Muslims.
So it's a colonized Islam.
Colonized
then.
Islam, precisely. I think, and we have to decolonize.
Yeah, we have to.
Because of we don't want to find ourselves in a society where we can contribute better. Yes. And I vividly remember, though I just look at it from a different perspective, where in one of the hadiths we are taught that if one of you is performing a salat in an area, that community will automatically get the rahmah, yes, of God, And now, let us look at it from a different perspective. What is it talking about? Is it talking about a person who just pray? Or is it talking about a person who impact positively towards the community in that area? Because of it can only be salat in terms of prayer.
And also, what is that? What does salah mean?
That's what it means. But if you go out, Sister Quraysh, and you remember there is a lady whom we helped to register for her master's. That was salat.
She's impacting the community eventually once
it was salat. Yeah. So this girl wouldn't have received her master's if we didn't respond to that adhan,
that call,
which says you must benefit mankind. So we responded to the adhan of benefiting mankind. And that is why in Islam there is this concept of malifatul qulub, the softening of the hearts. It's when we do good. So imagine if my parents knew me as a son who was disrespectful. Suddenly I start to respect them. It softens their hearts automatically.
But that's exactly it. Where Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he told the Muslims around him, he said, call the people to Islam, but without even words. And they said, and they asked him, but how? He said, through your character.
Precisely.
It's so the actions that and by default you're Muslim,
yes,
they should identify you simply by your character and the way you interact with other human beings.
And I think also one of the things which those who are giving dawah are failing to do is to build character.
Because there's too much focus on the technicalities.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we are not transforming. Yes. We are not becoming. And I think there is a poem where this guy is saying that a human being is a being which is in the state of becoming. Yes. And he went further on saying, God created man out of clay, and man created a clay pot. And he went further on saying, God created day and night, and man created light so that he can walk in the middle of the night. So we are the embodiment of the attributes of Allah.
That's beautiful. Yes.
So now imagine if you teach people who are coming into the deen the importance of these attributes and how to manifest them and how can they transform yourself and even the environment which you find yourself in. I don't think our parents will resist. I don't think our community will resist.
I think I would have to agree with you there 100%. But we're almost at the end of the interview. We've got just a minute left. I will come back with another one, but I'd like you to leave us with a parting comment for this one, just on that journey, on recognizing and the recognition of the message of Islam is beyond the technical performance of the actions, the halal and the haram.
I think for me, the Quran is a tool which we are not using. So the moment Muslims, and even non-Muslims, because of the Quran is not for Muslims anyway, the moment they look at it from a tool perspective, from a technology perspective, then I can assure you we'll have a better South Africa. Thank you.
Well, that's a wonderful message to leave, and considering that we are in the 4th Industrial Revolution and we have to start engaging with all the tools that we have, In many instances, I remember a long time ago, it was always this idea that the Quran was covered in a pretty cover, placed in a box and placed on your bookshelf, and that's absolutely wrong. It should be something that you're engaging with on a daily basis. It should be like a handbook of life, isn't it? So we'll come back, we'll talk a little bit more, and I want to talk a bit about Quebong, because you have a very interesting project, but we'll do that in the next interview. Fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
قسما بالله رب العالمين ما ارتضينا غير دين الله دين فهو دين الحق دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء.
هذا الدر وهذه الكلم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت